If you think the biggest story in real estate right now is all about interest rates or housing inventory, well, you're missing the real drama. Because the most significant action, it's all happening in the courtroom. We're about to unpack 3 huge legal battles that could seriously change the way we all buy and sell homes. And look, this is way more than just a few isolated legal squabbles. We're talking about lawsuits that could literally dismantle some of the industry's oldest power structures. You've got everything from major accusations against the biggest trade group in the business to antitrust showdowns with tech giants. The very rules of the game are on trial. These aren't just headlines, folks. They are major warning signs of a massive shift on the horizon. So, to really get a handle on all this, we're going to zero in on 3 key battlegrounds. First, a major discrimination case that just got wrapped up. Second, a pretty surprising twist in the ongoing war over agent commissions. And finally, a high-stakes clash between a tech behemoth and the U.S. government. Each one of these tells a critical piece of the story of what's happening right now.
All right, let's start with a case that put the incredibly powerful National Association of Realtors, you know him as the NAR, right under their microscope. A former employee came forward with some really serious accusations, but in a twist not everyone saw coming, the entire lawsuit just got thrown out of court.
So to really get what happened here, you kind of have to look at the timeline. Roshani Sheth worked at NAR for 5 years. Then, quite a while after she left, she files this discrimination lawsuit. It even grew to include civil rights claims. But then, boom, this past January, a federal judge just shut the whole thing down. The big question is, why? Okay, so at its core, this whole thing was about Sheth's claim that she was fired for speaking out against discrimination. But here's the kicker. The judge's decision wasn't actually about whether her claims were true or not. Nope, it all came down to legal technicalities. The case got tossed because, 1, too much time had passed, and 2, a previous agreement she had signed basically waived her right to sue over these issues. So how did the NAR react? Well, pretty much how you'd expect. They framed it as a total victory. They put out a statement saying they were pleased with the well-reasoned decision. It was their way of signaling that, for them, this difficult chapter is officially closed. And honestly, it was a win they really needed, especially with all the other legal fires they're fighting. And, that whole idea of legal strategy, it actually leads us right into our next story. Now, this one's a smaller piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. We're talking about those massive lawsuits challenging how real estate agents get paid. We're diving into a specific clash happening inside the Gibson settlement case. So here's the setup. You've got a group of home sellers who are not happy with a proposed settlement. So what do? They try to force 5 huge brokerages to open up their financial books. They filed a motion to get all these records, but the judge didn't just say no. He shut it down hard. And the judge's reason was pretty blunt. He pointed straight to legal precedent, basically saying that people objecting to a settlement can't just go on a fishing expedition for documents, a process lawyers call discovery. Now, it might sound like a small procedural move, but it's actually a really big deal because it stops the settlement from getting bogged down in major delays. All right, our final story is a real heavyweight bout. We're talking the federal government versus the real estate tech giant Zillow. The FTC is going after them with an antitrust case, but the whole thing has ground to a halt over a surprisingly basic question. Who exactly has to show up and answer questions? At the very center of this whole fight is this really fascinating legal shield called the Apex Doctrine. So here's what it is. It's a rule that basically protects the top brass, the C-suite executives, from getting dragged into depositions if they don't have unique firsthand knowledge. The whole idea is you can't just put the CEO on the stand if there are lower-level employees who actually know more about the nitty-gritty details. And this is exactly where they're stuck. It's a total standstill. The FTC is insisting that Zillow's CEO and its co-founders have critical information that nobody else has, and they have to testify. But Zillow is pushing back hard. They're arguing it would be totally redundant, and they've already offered up 22 other people who they say are way closer to the issue. They're even accusing the FTC of just trying to delay the whole process. So this stalemate is nowhere near being resolved. The next time they're all in court is scheduled for later this month, and a judge is going to have to break this deadlock. And look, it might seem like just a procedural squabble on the surface, but don't be fooled. The outcome here could set the entire tone for the huge antitrust battle that's still to come. All right, so let's zoom out. A dismissed lawsuit, a denied motion,
a fight over who has to testify. Why does any of this actually matter to you? Because when you start to connect the dots, you realize these are not isolated incidents. They paint a picture of an industry that is facing a level of legal and regulatory heat it just hasn't seen in decades.
When you look at all three of these stories together, four big themes really jump out. First, corporate accountability. Leadership and internal policies are under a microscope like never before. Second, the future of commissions. Yeah, that traditional model is still absolutely fighting for its life in court. Third, you got big tech versus the regulators. The government is keeping a very, very close eye on what tech companies are doing in the real estate space. And finally, and this might be the most important takeaway of all, these cases prove that procedural rules matter. A lot. Sometimes victory has nothing to do with the facts and everything to do with the fine print. And all of this, it leads to one giant, unanswered question. Right now, we are watching the fundamental rules of real estate get rewritten. But they're not being rewritten by the industry itself. They're being rewritten by the courts. And as that old system gets dismantled piece by piece, you just have to wonder, when all the dust finally settles, who's going to be left holding the keys?